was a great thing, especially when Candiria first like started out, man. It was just really we were just like feeding off of each other, you know what I mean? And we're just discovering like this new sound, you know what I mean? And then we eventually evolved into not even doing choruses, and then to all these off-time riffs, you know what I mean? And I gotta thank Kenny and Eric for all that stuff, but mostly Kenny, because Kenny pushed us into doing stuff like that. He introduced the jazz aspect to Candiria, and then Eric and Chris Puma, the original guitar player Chris Puma, followed suit. They just started writing these amazing like riffs that were just like sliding out of time, and it was awesome. It was really good experience.
Since 1992 and all those years that have gone by, all the trends that have come and gone, do they affect you? Do they affect the songwriting process?
Well, no, the only thing that really affects the songwriting process is what we're into, what we're influenced by at the time. You know what I mean? If Candiria was into opera, we would have found a way to join together, to blend opera, jazz, and hardcore and metal together, and hip hop in one song, if we could. You know what I mean? So it's really like just really being honest about where we were coming from, what we're influenced by, what what bands, artists were driving us, and where we were in our lives. It's always about like, all right, what can we do new? What can we do new now? You know what I mean? You're always trying to discover a new way of doing things. That's what Candiria was mostly about.
All the stuff that you've done is so unorthodox. It's so unconventional. Is there any pressure from labels?
In the beginning, no. In the beginning, not really. They just really appreciated like what we did, all the labels that we were signed to. When we were signed to Type A Records, that's when we kind of, not when we weren't pressured, but that's when David Bennett came to us, like maybe you guys should try singing, and maybe try having some choruses. And at first we were like, nah, get out of here, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But then sat down and thought about it. It's like, we spent, Candiria is all about trying out new things and like, and trying to outdo ourselves and just trying to really create something new. I'm like, you know what? We spent so many years without choruses, just screaming. It would be nice to try something new. And I know that I've been wanting to sing for like a while, so I completely embraced it. If you look through like my music collection, it was either mostly hip hop or artists who were singing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, yeah, you know what? Why not do it? And after the first song that I sang, I completely fell in love with it. Not saying, I was getting kind of bored of just screaming. You know what I mean? And I know that like with screaming, as much as I do love it, only pretty much in a sense only one emotion can really be portrayed from that. Usually like angst or whatever. For the most part, you know what I mean? But like I wanted to kind of also portray like like an emotional, a deep emotional side, more personal side or whatever. So I think singing for me was the right way to go. You know what I mean? But that's in terms of pressure, or not pressure, but in terms of that's the closest we ever came to something like that from a label. But it was more like a suggestion. Why don't you guys give that a shot? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. You were saying earlier in the conversation that you do what influences you right now. What's currently influencing you, and what are you currently trying to say?
With Hope Till Sphere, it's pretty much just like it's like more Christian lifestyle. I'm Christian. You know what I mean? And like so, and that's a big part of my life now. And so like and even though I'm not perfect, when I try to put my faith into words, but also put in there as well that that I'm not perfect, that none of us are. You know what I mean? And like and so that's what's moving me. But or in terms of lyrically, now in terms of melody and music wise, just really solid catchy songs. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because when you have a message, the best way for a message to come across to people is for them to for it to be catchy and lodge and have the melody lodge itself in their hearts and in their minds. So, you know what I mean? So it's a complete opposite for the most part of what I've done with Candiria in the earlier years. You know what I mean? It's like I did that for so long. To me, right now, breaking new boundaries is doing what I'm doing now. You know what I mean? Because I
Yeah.
spent so many years just doing all that wacky stuff with Candiria. You know, so that's what's inspiring me right now. In terms of Candiria, I wrote Kissed Along, the last record. That the record was finalized in 2006, and by then the band was already, for the most part, broken up. So the label didn't want to put the record out, and finally he decided, I think at the end of 2008, to finally put the record out. And so it's weird because while we were writing that record, we were so emotionally attached to it because once again we were writing uh, um, in accordance with what we've been influenced by in our lives and musically, and that album that album always have a place in time, with us or whatever. Mm. But now it's been so many years, a couple of years since I wrote it, that I'm kind of not attached to it anymore because it was so long ago when I wrote it. You know what I mean? I'm not the same person who I was even when I wrote that album, like 3 years ago, whatever, 4 years ago.
You said that Hope Kills Fear has a lot of Christian influence.
Yeah.
I remember hearing back, I'm not sure how long ago, but I remember hearing a quote from you saying that at one point in your life you were a Satanist.
Yeah, I pretty much, when I was younger, I dabbled in the occult, and that's because all growing up throughout my life, I was, there was a lot of, I grew up around black magic, people in my family, some people, doing it, and people who were doing it to my family, and then, so I grew up around there. By the time I was 17, I started hanging out with the Chris Puma, and I started, he's one of the original companies in Candiria. He kind of got me into the occult, and I would study the Satanic Bible, you know what I mean? I would do a couple of rituals, and they all worked, which is what bugged me out, they all worked. And I'm like, wow, that's weird. And, but the suicidal thoughts and the depression that came after that just wasn't, I feel is definitely a result of that. And that was a real dark point in my life, you know what I mean? And so once I started getting out that far, I'm like, all right, well, if that exists, if that's real, then the other side has to be real. The same way there's light and dark, there's got to be good and evil. And then from the things that I grew up seeing and the things I experienced myself, I just started coming to the realization, that there is a God, Yeah. So I did like a complete 180. Is it 180 or 360? One of them. A complete turnaround from where I was starting up till now, and I feel that I went through all of those things for a reason.
Was there a certain event that made you turn that around?
There was a couple of events. There was a few events, and throughout my life, and just certain certain things that I went through, like the house, this is gonna get a little deeper, like the house I grew in, and I know it might be some hard for people to believe, but the house I grew up in was heavily haunted, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like completely infested with demons, you know what I mean? And I know it's a hard thing for some people to hear, they don't believe it, but I'm not lying to you, you know what I mean? I'm not gonna sit there and put my stuff out like that in publication and just come out with a lie like that. Like that stuff is completely real, and certain things happen in the house that I'm not gonna get into, but certain things that happen in the house that definitely bugged me out, and I wasn't the only one who saw it. My family saw it too. So it's so to see those things, I'm like, all right, well, if demons exist, then angels exist. If the devil exists, then God exists. You know what I mean? So it's just natural analysis. You can't have one without the other. So that helped, believe it or not, that helped in my belief.
I'm still trying to soak that in, actually, about what you were saying about your house.
Yeah, there was this one time where I'll tell you this one specific story, and we were recording "What Doesn't Kill You," and I remember I got a call from my mother, and she was like, come to the house. I had my own apartment, blah blah blah, and with my roommate, and come to the house. She goes, because the phone's cut. They cut the phone off or whatever because I'm scared that she was calling for a payphone. And she never said that because she's pretty much battled those things all her life. As me growing up, I always saw her dealing with things like that. It was a regular norm for me. It was a normal event for me. You know what I mean? Just the same way getting up and going for me to get up and see things happening in my house that was supernatural. You know what I mean? So ever since I was 4 or 5 years old, you know, and I remember this time, you know, she called me and I went home. I told Eric from Candiria was staying over in my apartment, and I told him about it. And I went over there. Some weird stuff happened, and eventually I came back. And then I told my roommate about it. And a couple of days later, he's like, "Let's go over to the house." And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, why not? You know, we like the Ghostbusters, right?" And like, so he brings his recorder, thinking he's like the Ghostbusters, like, you know, like he's 5 years old. I'm like, "Dude, what's wrong with you, right?" So we go to the house. They already. My mom was staying at my sister's house because she was too scared to stay there, but the dog was still there. So we go to the house, and then we get to the house. It just felt weird. We opened the door. Okay, now we said that we wanted to stay there for like 15 minutes. Okay, we'll stay there for 15 minutes. And let me backtrack a bit. My mother said that it was my next door neighbor doing all this stuff, doing all these spells and stuff towards her to get her to move, right? Just to let you know. Anyway, so we walk in the house, walk in, the dog in the corner, like whimpering, and then after 30 seconds, I realized there was people in the house that started barking like crazy. You know what I mean? And so in my head, I'm like, all right, the dog thought we were one of the things that are in my house, my mom's house now, because by this time I already moved out. We go to the kitchen, and my mom had her sewing machine in front of the basement door. I go like this to my friend Jason, "Do you want to go down?" And he's like, "Nah." I'm like, "All right, you know." So we opened my mom's bedroom door, and it was pitch black. And these are two guys in their 30s, right? And he's this white kid, Jewish kid, well, you know, grown up Jewish, but doesn't really believe in anything. You know what I mean? We opened the door. I said, "You first." He goes, "No." I said, "You go." And he goes, "No, you first." I took 2 steps in there, man, and like instantly something came over me where like I pretty much hunched down. I felt like an oppression, and I felt like a vacuum. Something got sucked out of me, and I said, "Yo, we got to get out of here." And the minute I said, "Yo, we got to get out of here," I heard a loud growl fill up the whole room. It was coming from everywhere, and then I started walking out. I'm like, "We gotta get out of here." And my friend's like, "Yo, did you hear something?" Why stuttering? I said, "Yeah." He goes, "What did you hear?" Like, "I heard a growl." He goes, "That's what I heard." We started leaving the house, right? And things in your mind, you're analyzing, trying to justify what it was. Or maybe it was an airplane. Well, if it was an airplane, I would still hear the plane roaring over my house. But then we walked out the room, it stopped. You know what I mean? So we're going outside, and we open the door on my porch. Mind you, it's around like midnight, so right. Open the door, and guess who's standing in front of the house? My next door neighbor. We timed the recording. We were only in the house for 3 minutes. You know, and my next door neighbor standing in front of the thing with a hood on, with a jacket, eyeing us down, and then she walks away. I'm like, what the heck was that? And we just went back to my apartment. We just sat there, and like, what the heck did we just experience? And I finally told my mother about it. She goes, "Oh yeah." She goes, "Sometimes I go in that room and I see a 9-foot tall man in there." So it's like really weird stuff, man. You know what I mean? And I'm putting this out in publication, and I know some people might just think I'm nuts or whatever the case may be. Like, I don't care, man. Like, I lived it. You could have me tell you the same story next year, and it won't change. It's the same exact story because it's the absolute truth.
Do you have stories similar to that are on the less of a dark side and more on like a Christian side, so to speak?
There was this, let me see, what is it? I mean, there's a couple I'm trying to think of some, like, right away. I mean, I could give you the first instance that happened to me that I knew. I'll give you 2, actually. There was the first time I started, I become a Christian, I guess. So I was sitting in my room, and it was dark, but I had one light on, and it was on my desk or whatever. I sat there, and like something I just felt like a good presence, like someone was in the room with me, you know what I mean? It was weird, and like, not weird, but like, it was something, it was just, something just came over me, and pretty much, a urge came over me, like, pretty much, I just heard, like, you know, read that, you know what I mean? And I kind of heard, I felt, and I looked over, and there was, you know, the small green Gideon's Bible or whatever, and like, and I looked at it, and the light was shining right on it, and like, I know that might sound cliche or whatever, I'm just telling you how it happened. And I picked it up and I started reading it. I started reading Proverbs, and like and the first thing I noticed was just the beautiful words. I'm like, because I love words, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, I'm like, wow, I'm like, these words are alive, and like everything just like was just like touching my life. It's like to me, it's the book of life. It's the manual for your life. You know, if you buy a TV, if you buy a VCR, there's a manual that comes to tell you how to figure certain things out. That's exactly what the Bible is. You know, and so it's like, and all these things, I'm like, wow. I'm like, here's the repercussions if you do this, and here's the rewards if you do this. And like, here's what happens if you live your life this way. I'm like, wow. And the poetry was just amazing. And ever since then, I was just hooked. You know what I mean? It's like, and the thing is, I'm not perfect, you know. Even after I became Christian, like, I did things that, like, sometimes your old habits will come back, and you have to, like, wrestle with them, sometimes, you know what I mean? But lean on God's strength, and like, I'll always, my faith will never be gone to that. Like, I know in my heart that God's real. You know what I mean? I bet my life on it. You know what I mean? The same way that through my experiences, I know that the devil is definitely real. You know what I mean?
This may be a philosophical question, but what do you think, in your own personal opinion, what do you think life is about, the point of existence?
The point of existence is, to me, like, you're asking someone like who's Christian, so therefore the answer is going to always revert to God, you know what I mean? Like, if you read the Bible, it says, well, we were created for Him, you know what I mean? And I really feel my heart, especially from reading that, we are created for God, you know what I mean? I feel that our life here is it's just a vapor, especially the Christian, it's not your home, you know what I mean? You're here for a while, but when you die, your spirit has to go someplace, you know what I mean? And there's only two places where your spirit can go. It can either go to heaven or hell. And I believe the reason why I believe in those two things is because, once again, because of my experiences, that there's the good, there's the bad, there's the God, there's the devil. God's in heaven, the devil's got to be in hell. They can't exist in the same place. So to me, I really feel that we are created to serve God. And like, people's like, I'm not created to serve anyone. Dude, you serve, when you go to work, you're serving someone. You gotta, in order to survive, you have to serve someone. Either you go to work, you're a musician, you're writing records, you're serving your record company, you're serving your fan. You know what I mean? And it's not necessarily a bad word. You know what I mean? It's not an oppressive word, because I feel liberated. I feel like the blinds are lifted off my eyes. I feel like a sense of joy that's amazing. I'm gonna tell you something right now. Okay? I went to the doctors last year, and the doctors diagnosed me with a hereditary eye disease that says I'm gonna go blind. And the doctor says there's no cure for it. And the first thing that popped in my mind is like, thank God I'm Christian. And here, and like, sometimes it does get hard, you know what I mean? But like, but my joy is still there. This is the happiest I've ever been in my life, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, and to me, that's the key to having God in your life. Nothing can take that joy away, you know?
When you were with Candiria, you were in a van accident, a pretty serious one. You guys were awarded $29 million for the accident. Explain a little bit about that. Tie that in with what you just talked about Christianity and how you dealt with that whole situation.
Well, with the it showed me, right, that tomorrow's not promised to you. So you better take account of your life, because you never know when your last day is. A couple of hours before that accident, several hours before that accident, I was talking to my bass player's sister-in-law. We were in Albany, somewhere in upstate New York, and she was talking about roller coasters, and I told her I love roller coasters because it's the closest you can get to death without dying. And several hours later, I was corrected. I got into the accident, and like the first thing I opened up when I opened my eyes, I'm like, "Wow, Jesus, I'm alive," and I wasn't wearing a seat, but everyone else got thrown out, and which bugged me out a bit, and it just shows me to take kind of your life. And from then on, like, I know that after that, pretty much we had to take like 2 years off. Then we started writing again, and then I started singing, and then we did What Doesn't Kill You Kiss the Lie, and then the band eventually broke up. But now I'm doing Hope Kills Fear, so I feel that everything that happened for a reason. I feel that like God teaches you lessons through suffering. How else? It's like, how do you know not to do a certain thing sometimes, a lot of times, by going through pain? Like, how do you become, when you work out a muscle, okay, how do you get strong? When it has to hurt first, your muscles rip, and then it goes back together and gets strong, and your arms get bigger. But you have to go through pain before you become strong. how life is. Sometimes God will a lesson will be taught to you like that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that God's the reason why we got into the accident. I would never say that. But I'm saying, but it's like, all right, here's a situation that came your way in your life, but you can rise from it. And two things that happen: hard time makes heroes, or it makes cowards. That's it. There's really no in between. You have a hard time comes your way, you're either going to run away from it or you're going to take it on. So you have to make a choice: am I a hero or am I a coward? And when it comes away, it's best for you to choose a hero, because then you become stronger. You know what I mean? So I kind of look at it that in order for Hope Kills Fear to have happened, Candiria had to die. And so through Candiria's death, the birth of Hope Kills Fear happened. And it's the same way with a seed and a plant. In order for a plant to come out of a seed, the seed has to open up and die. So to me, it's the same exact principle. And to me, I knew that what I'm doing with Hope Kills Fear was supposed to happen, because we started writing the music, but we didn't have a name for the band. And I remember receiving an email from someone, a kid named Brandon, and I checked out his headline for first page or whatever, and it said Hope Kills Fear. I'm like, wow, that's a cool name. I googled it, no one had the name. I'm like, wow, that's cool. And then I opened up his email, and it said, Carley, he goes, I want to thank you. You're one of my favorite vocalists, one of my favorite singers. I want to let you know that your songs have helped me through some rough times, and I'm going through cancer right now, and your lyrics are helping me out even more. And so to me, it was a confirmation from God that what I was doing is the right thing. I got a band name from it, accompanied with the story, with this letter from this kid saying, all right, I knew that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So to me, that's what, in regards to the accident and how that mixes in with Christianity. I hope I explained it.
You did very well. Obviously, money does not compare to losing your life or anything that has to do with an experience like that. But being awarded $29 million for that accident, how does that change your life?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. It was actually, for a while, it was actually, it reduced my quality of life, to tell you the truth. And let me explain how. Because we were in litigation for like 2 years, after that, with appeals and stuff, and we had to worry about going back to trial, them fighting it, and all this stuff, and them, following us around with private eyes, to see if we were faking our injuries. So it was actually, it actually wasn't cool. You know what I mean? And then we're like, okay, we're not going to tell anyone that, that we've been awarded like that amount or whatever. And next thing you know, people, it's all online newspapers, and when I'm getting phone calls from people I haven't heard from, and longest text messages from people I haven't heard in the longest or whatever. So it was like a little weird, you know what I mean? And we, I'm not going to disclose the amount that we got, but I'm definitely glad that we got, something out of it, because now I could focus more